So today we have World Bank Country Director Vietnam Osman Yon, Australian Ambassador to Vietnam Robin Maui, to share with us about their aspiration for Vietnam. So the first question is for World Bank Country Director to Vietnam Osman. Since the launching of the report in 2016, Vietnam have witnessed economic growth of 6 to 7% per year. Can you share with us the achievement of Vietnam, especially in 2018 and the first half of 2019?
Thank you so much for this interview. Vietnam has been growing between 6.7 almost to 7% over the last 3 years. At the same time, there have been a number of policies which have been enacted by the government, taking into account the fact that the country needs to move fast, but the country needs also to absorb innovation, but do it in a way that it is being translated into jobs, do it in a way that it is being translated into economic growth, do it in a way that also it brings additional resources for investment, whether it is related to FDIs, which require improving the business environment, or whether it is related simply to just promoting the private sector. Within our discussion, I will be able to come a little bit more on where Vietnam need to put efforts going forward in order to further accelerate the implementation of the Vietnam 2035. The challenges are going to be much more complex and perhaps much more difficult. And this is one of the reasons why we can only encourage Vietnam to do more further in-depth reform while the time is appropriate, while the context is favorable, in order to prepare the headwinds of the two next cycle before 2035. It will be complicated because of a number of reasons. Number one is most of the global winds currently turns toward a slowdown of the economy worldwide. Vietnam needs to be well prepared in order to be able to withstand the shocks resulting from that slowdown. Number two is Vietnam pay due attention on the management of its natural capital. Number three challenge which Vietnam is going to face will be related to the human capital. How is Vietnam going to continue to build a strong human capital which can help the country really to be at the forefront of innovation, to the forefront of technology and the digital agenda where the world is going, in order to have a competitive labor force, a competitive market. Are still extremely relevant today, and there is much more room which Vietnam can do. But Vietnam cannot do that without also taking into account that there are new challenges which the country will be facing going forward. Vietnam will be more and more facing an aging population. So the issue of factor productivity will progressively be linked to how the demographics of Vietnam will evolve. And this is where the notion of automation, of bringing innovations, this is where revisiting the skills with respect to the labor force of Vietnam of tomorrow, and this has to start now. Whether it is related to also looking more and more on how to reform the state-owned enterprises, bringing in the private sector and improving the efficiency of spending. If Vietnam manages the path of building strong human capital, if Vietnam manages to keep the path of building quality infrastructure, if Vietnam pay due attention on the management of its natural asset, then Vietnam can be even a faster, successful middle-income country.
There is a need for Vietnam to continue to pay close attention to its productivity indicators, and a key part of how it will do that is by skilling up its workforce for the future, so that rather than having the two operate independently, they are in constant consultation and reinforcing need and supply on either side. So with that close conversation between the industry sector and the skills providers, that's when a country can really start to focus in a very strategic way on how it will skill up the right parts of its workforce.
Thank you so much.
In one of my last op-ed, I talked about this need of taking a prime approach. Prime, P, as how to improve planning, R as how to resources allocation, I how to better manage information, M how to manage the overall prospect of environmental sustainability and emerging issues, and E as enforcement when it comes to laws and regulations. And Vietnam in many ways have very good environmental laws. The fundamental challenge is how are they being implemented concretely on the ground. And implementation of laws is not only about sanctions. It has also to do with incentives in order to reward good behavior and to sanction bad behavior. And striking that balance is extremely critical.
Well, obviously there's been an enormous change in Hanoi in 25 years, and the biggest change for me has been the change in the roads and the move away from what was predominantly bicycles with some motorbikes and larger trucks that were used for transportation of goods into an environment where there are so many motorbikes and increasing numbers of cars on the roads and very few bicycles. So that's been the major change, and you can see that reflected in the issues that we have with air pollution in Vietnam. Despite the enormous economic growth, there are still large parts of Hanoi that I recognise as the place that I lived a quarter of a century ago. And I think that speaks to a very strategic approach by the Vietnamese people. I believe that you're fully aware of all of the benefits and advantages you have in this country. And as Usman has said, with by maintaining that recognition and understanding the importance of the beauty and the assets that you have around you, both in the urban and the natural environment, that will help drive a very sensible approach to development going forward. That Vietnam's economic growth is at a point where, with the right management, it can continue in a positive direction, and some of the risks and pitfalls can be avoided. And you have a very smart younger generation who are growing up on the cusp of this great growth story, and will, we hope, look around them and see what is the right way to go. How should we take our country forward to preserve the environment and to have a clean and green and inclusive future. I do have the impression that, as with many countries around the world, there is a younger generation here in Vietnam which is acutely aware of the resources at its disposal, of the assets that its country has to offer, and of the sort of world that they want to inhabit in the future. And my great hope is that that awareness will help drive the development of this country forward. And so we are in the hands of the next generation. The best we can do for it is to support the current models of growth, to influence where we can with economic reform and support a strong growth story here in Vietnam going forward, and then leave a strong legacy for the next generation to take forward.
The Vietnamese young generation has a fantastic opportunity to make history. Because of the globalization, will offer tremendous opportunity to the young Vietnamese to learn, to evolve, but also to contribute. And that is no longer that far. 2035 is at the corner, and I'm extremely confident on the capacity, on the courage, and the determination of the Vietnamese people to be able to rise up to that challenge going forward.
Thank you so much.
Well, as a long-standing partner and friend of Vietnam, and I'm very much looking forward to being here for part of that journey towards 2035.
Thank you so much.
by 2035, Vietnam will be celebrating its 60 years anniversary. And this is where in life you have a combination of experience, a combination of maturity, but also the gift of really wanting to leave a good legacy. And the legacy which we want really to see Vietnam in 2035 will be the legacy of a prosperous country, really a clean, green, and environmentally sustainable country, but also a legacy of really an inclusive society where all Vietnamese can really benefit from the dividend of an inclusive, green and clean growth, and at the same time be citizens of the world.
Definitely. Yeah, thank you so much for a very insightful conversation today.
Together or separately?
Together.
Okay, so they will be more high bar.
Okay.
Can you look at the camera?
Yeah.
Ok. 1, 2, 3.
Chúc mừng năm mới.